Hi, this is Marcy from Suffolk Nassau Agile Paws on Long Island in New York, and you're listening to Bad Dog Agility, where the naughty dogs train.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 16. Today's podcast is brought to you by IMCO Sport Dog Agility Equipment. IMCO Sport offers a wide range of high-quality, easy-to-move dog agility equipment for all levels from beginners to champions. One of their newest products is the revolutionary seesaw training aid, the Tip Assist, which can be used with any seesaw, comes with an instructional DVD, and can be shipped worldwide. The Tip Assist aids in the training of your dog to achieve confidence, improve speed, and develop independence on the seesaw. Visit imcosport.com for more information on the Tip Assist, as well as other innovative products including jumps, weave poles, and contact equipment. There will also be a link on our podcast page. This week's podcast is a continuation of our interview with Kathy Sdao. If you haven't heard the first half, you'll want to download episode 15 from iTunes or find it on baddogagility.com. So we kind of touched on speed, and in agility, speed is the name of the game. Everybody wants their dog to do things right, but they want them to do it right as fast as they can.
Yeah.
And I think some people have a notion that clicker training a dog creates a dog that really understands, but not necessarily a dog that is going all out and is doing everything at full speed. So what kind of thoughts or advice do you have, along those lines?
That's so interesting. We probably don't have time to get into the huge conversation about whether every click is followed by primary reinforcement. Without getting into the weeds of this conversation, which I just presented something on this at the Behavior Analysis Conference here in Seattle. I would say yes. Most clicker trainers, and certainly the clicker trainers on the faculty at Clicker Expo, would say that if you're going to click, you're going to pay with a primary reinforcer. Often food, it can be a toy, can be other things, but you're not going to click a dog in action, let's say on a course doing obstacles, and expect them to continue working. Well, what that opens up is a conversation about, but wait, I don't want them to stop every time. How do I get the flow? I don't want to keep interrupting them. And I think that opens up the concept of a really comfortable understanding of how cues function as replacement clicks. That concept of well-trained cues that have been taught using pretty exclusively positive reinforcement, in other words, unpoisoned cues. The fact that those cues are themselves conditioned reinforcers and can replace the click opens up to me a way to get long, fast, fluent behavior chains without the stuttering, without the slowing, waiting for the click. If I click a dog, I'm saying to them, you've done enough right now. Come and get the treat, or I'm going to throw the treat to you, or that's enough for this little segment of training. You don't have to keep working. But in situations where we want a longer behavior chain, I'm less familiar with agility, but I've done a fair amount of training of service dogs or guide dogs. You need them to keep working. You don't need them to stop guiding their blind handler on the street. How do you get that to happen without slowing them down or interrupting their, quote, drive, close quote? Skinnerians like me usually don't use the word drive, but I know what people mean by that. And I think it comes back to that understanding of when do you stop clicking, but continue to use intentional reinforcement in the middle of the behavior chain, but that reinforcement is your well-timed cues. I think for a lot of people, that's a profound concept. And it gets back to that idea of, I don't want the clicking to interfere with my dog's speed. I also would say, a little bit separate thing, I think people have a difficult time setting speed as their clickable criteria. I think their eyes don't see it well. And so to be able to say, I'm going to click the faster of these A-frame performances, whatever you want speed on, I think implies you have to have eyeballs that are well tuned to be able to reinforce only average and above speeds. It doesn't mean you're only reinforcing the really fast ones. It means you're reinforcing if the the speed of the performance on a certain obstacle followed a bell curve. What you're saying as you're trying to get faster performance isn't, I'm only going to reinforce the end of the bell curve that's on the speedy end. It says I'm going to shave off reinforcement for those performances that are on the slow end of that bell curve. You're gradually increasing speed so that the dog always can hit that criterion. It always has a chance of being successful. But when I've worked with students on that, to me, it can be a different thing to tune your eyeballs to. You're letting go of your emphasis on accuracy a little bit. Not completely. Of course, we still need accuracy, but you're juggling the speed ball in the air and saying, okay, for now, I'm going to bias my own observation skills to be reinforcing the faster performances. So both of those things, the usage of cues as replacement conditioned reinforcers within a behavior chain, but also that ability to really be able to see differences in speed and base your binary decision about whether to reinforce or not, base it on whether that speed met your current criteria. I think those are things trainers don't often do firsthand. At least the trainers I'm working with, that's not their first skill.
Right. And that idea of average or better, I love that idea. I actually came home from Clicker Expo and I thought I had the answer to all of agility training. And I wanted to get the laser start line and end line things that they use in agility for timing, the timers. They're like thousands of dollars. And I was trying to figure out how I could buy, a set and set it up on a course and then just have the big timer up so that I could reward average or better. And I never, got around to buying this, huge apparatus to implement it. But that was what I came away thinking was this idea of average or better. That's the answer to everything.
Tara, that sounds like a great setup. I'd even automate it more and just have the timer reinforced. Like you wouldn't even have to look at the timer. You just let it click or not.
Right.
Oh, I like that.
So let me ask you talked a little bit about behavior chains, and I think a lot of people in agility consider themselves positive trainers. And Sarah and I had talked about in other podcasts how we think among all the dog sports that perhaps agility's evolved the fastest, the most users, most trainers, most entries, that sort of thing, a very rapidly evolving sport, one that focuses on speed and, positive training, I think really lends itself to that. When you bring in a lot of positive punishment, one of the immediate fallouts for a large percent of dogs is a loss of speed. And that's a big no-no. Nobody wants the slow dog in agility. And so I think people are more quick to gravitate toward, a more positive reinforcement approach. Whereas in a sport like obedience, where there isn't necessarily the same, the same impetus on speed, and maybe a little more control, there's not such an obvious departure for people to move from, one to the other. But, I think most agility people basically consider themselves positive trainers. But when you look at clicker training specifically, and even positive training, it's still very much a use when teaching the dog. But once the dog has mastered the skill, it kind of goes away. And in fact, in some percent of even top trainers, you will have the introduction of punishment for failure to perform presumed learned behaviors. So my question there is, how do you continue to maintain those behaviors that you worked so hard to teach in a positive way? And a lot of people feel compelled to move in a different direction because when they get to the ring, when they start competing, they lose a little bit of what they've taught.
I think we always have that pressure on us to go, you know what, there's going to be a point at which I'm going to say to the dog, you know what, there's a negative consequence here. You don't have a choice. You're going to have to do this thing for whatever reason. And that's human nature, and it's the pressure of competition, and it's certainly common. But the thing that really keeps haunting me when that choice comes up for me is, do I want to pay the astronomically high price of poisoning my cues by using occasional positive punishment? And for me, as a selfish trainer who says the way I create and maintain strong behavior chains is through the use of careful cueing internal to that behavior chain, and those cues are going to serve as replacement clicks. The fact that introducing some positive punishment into that scenario wrecks that. It poisons those cues. And from the research Dr. Rosales Ruiz has done and presents at Clicker Expo, I think if I'm understanding this correctly, they're poisoned for the long term. Clients will ask me, well, how do I unpoison my cues? I don't know how to do that. You have to start over. Like, who wants to do that? So for me, the choice that you make as a trainer about whether to introduce some compulsion or not in there is one that should be based on your own needs as a trainer. And to me, the price is simply too high. So what do you want your cues to be associated with? You want them, in a perfect world, your cues are followed by marker signals, are followed by primary reinforcement nearly all the time. When you give a cue, it means you're pretty sure the dog's going to do the thing that you're going to mark and you're going to reinforce. Or you're at least going to use another condition reinforcer and ask them to do something else. A problem enters when you give a cue, and that's followed, interestingly, by not only by some sort of force, compulsion, leash pop, physical coercion, however you introduce that, or interestingly, the cue is followed a lot of the time by simply lack of reinforcement. That's not great either, right? So what do you want your cues out in the perfect world to be? Followed by reinforcement. Cue followed by reinforcement. Cue followed by positive reinforcement. So anything that varies from that is simply setting up for you that possibility that your cues aren't going to serve that role you need them to do, which is to maintain fast, fluent, precise behavior in the middle of a behavior chain. And frankly, all of us who do any version of advanced training, we're teaching behavior chains. It's nice to teach a discrete behavior, a trick or a one-off behavior, or a dog to sit to go out the doorway. All of those are lovely. But for most of us who are doing some sort of competition or real-world applied work with our dogs, like guide dog training I just mentioned, we need behavior chains. And if we need behavior chains, we need cues to be unpoisoned. So your question is a really profound one. It happens in all kinds of contexts of training where trainers reach a point where they say, well, now you know this behavior, so I'm going to make you do it. And the way we, quote, make animals do behaviors, close quote, is to make it worth their while by positively reinforcing it, which is a really kind of frustrating answer. It's like, wait, my power always comes back to being excellent at positive reinforcement. Yeah, I think that's what the science implies, especially in a sport like agility, where I think you're looking for fast, happy, enthusiastic performance. And again, I'm not an expert in agility, but for me, as an outsider, I'd be saying, I never want my dog to be in any way holding back because they're uncertain or afraid of what's going to happen. I actually worked with a client last week. Again, I get agility folks coming to see me. I don't know what this is about because the start line stay is such a problem. That dog is petrified on the start line. I'm telling you, there's a classically conditioned aversion to that start line, and I'm pretty sure in that dog's history, she's not happy to be at that start line because she's broken the stay, and so she's gotten reprimanded. So it sets up this whole momentum of the entire sport is becoming poisoned because it starts with this very conflicted behavior at the start line. So it all comes back to, but we have to make them stay, says my client. Well, if you have to make them stay, it's through your good training that, quote, makes them stay. Did that make sense?
No, it absolutely makes sense. And, you can go to any trial, and I'm sure you've had this experience with clients. You say you have a lot of agility clients coming to you, without even hearing about those clients. I would guess that their biggest problems are going to be start lines, contact performance, and probably weave pull performance. I think those are the most common areas where people really run into issues. Handling, there just doesn't seem to be, there are issues that can arise, but I think most issues with training and agility where the dog really starts to develop a dislike of the sport, I think comes in those areas.
I think people have a harder time recognizing the fact that handling the cues and handling may be their problem also. So they're less likely to seek out advice and help.
To say that this is an issue, right? I think that's true. Well, let me back up a little bit and I'll talk briefly about my own evolution in training. Sarah and I started with a trainer whose take on clicker training was that she didn't do it because it produced some very strange behaviors in the dog. The dog would sit with one paw up, that sort of thing. And so it immediately took us on a different path in dog training, and we were on that path for several years. Then I was very happy, in our instance, to find someone like Susan Garrett, in addition to the many other fine agility instructors that we've had over the years in the Texas area who use really motivational methods, just a very different approach. And so you start initially with, teaching and rewarding with food, and then using some kind of positive punishment to ensure compliance. And then we think of ourselves as evolving, and then we say, okay, we're teaching with positive methods, and now instead of positively punishing you, we're just going to withhold the reward. Well, now we have a couple of trainers, and they're at the very top of the game, and I mean internationally, that when they are teaching, training, and using in competition very difficult to teach and maintain performances. In this case, I'm talking specifically about the running dog walk, where there's no stopping at the end of the contact, and they run through and they hit the yellow. And this gives them a tremendous advantage in standard runs at big competitions. But in a lot of the teaching phase, rather than withholding a reward, the dog is getting a reward virtually with every repetition. And what they do is some version of more reward and less reward. So that, I remember being stunned the first time, I heard that. And she was like, well, my dog kind of demotivates easily. And so I'm always praising her. And when she does something really great, I give her a really great reward. We throw a party, and she says training the dog is very exhausting for that reason, but the dog is tremendous. And it made me wonder about all the dogs that, I've seen out here locally, and dogs even that we've owned. And I thought, well, maybe I could have gotten so much more out of them if I'd approached training that way. What are your thoughts on using, I don't even know how to identify it, like differential rewards, but the dog always getting something rather than withholding some kind of reward in training?
I love this question because it's my luck, my good fortune in being able to teach at Clicker Expos also means when I'm not up teaching, I get to attend my colleagues' presentations. And the presentations I've been most wowed by and copiously taking notes and sitting through the same presentation 2 and 3 times are my friends from Sweden, Emily Vey Johnson and Eva Bertelsen, who wrote Agility Right from the Start, this lovely book on They're brilliant teachers. I just think they're phenomenal. But here's one of the concepts they introduced in this presentation, and I thought, what? Like, this can't be. Because, of course, their concept of transporting the dog from point A to point B, the dog's never in limbo. The dog always has a clear, way to move them about. Well, that involves saying to these dogs, after you've made a mistake, sometimes I'm going to put kibble on your nose and lead you to the next thing. In other words, to me, in my scientific mind, they are feeding kibble to a dog who has just entered the reef poles wrong. You can't do that. You have to be clear that there was a mistake made. You have to withhold food. And in listening to them and talking to them and debating with them, I want to do the, face to palm kind of thing, forehead to my palm kind of thing and go, oh, right. This is the marine mammal concept of least reinforcing stimulus. What do you do when an animal's made a mistake? Well, if you're Shamu's trainer on stage in front of 1,000 people who've paid $100 and Shamu not only makes a mistake, Shamu threatens you somehow. What is your option for what you're going to do on stage with Shamu? Well, what marine mammal trainers often use this term is, at that moment, for the next 3 to 5 seconds, you will do whatever that animal finds least reinforcing. Not unreinforcing, not punishing. Just not very thrilling. So that might actually mean you're actually going to pick up their bucket and move to the other end of the stage. You're going to do something that doesn't disengage you from the animal, doesn't punish. It isn't the big treat party that this trainer's talking about. So it's the first time I had to work through the same thing you're talking about, which is, wait a minute, your goal is to keep them engaged and happy and working, and through use of some version of differential reinforcement, not the binary choice I often present to trainers, you either reinforce or you don't. What does that do? How does that affect behavior? And it's been, for me, a bit of an epiphany. It's new to me. So I'm still learning about it and trying to incorporate that more into my own training.
Well, it's definitely new to us. I mean, I remember thinking before all that, we'd really figured all this dog training stuff out,
Yeah.
Positive reinforcement, withhold the reward.
Yep.
Dog's going to learn quickly. It's going to be great. There isn't going to be any fallout. There's going to be no poison cues. Our next puppies were going to be brilliant. And, it just hasn't worked out that way. And suddenly people are doing crazy things like rewarding their dog all the time and giving them extra rewards. And, I don't know if it's a jackpot or not a jackpot. It shouldn't work in theory, but their dogs are out there just crushing the competition with these unbelievable performances. And for them, at least, for that specific trainer, those specific trainers, the results are reproducible, which is a big deal.
I think you have to have faith in your abilities as a trainer too. And if your dog makes a mistake, you have to wonder, is it going to be easier to train through the mistake if it's rewarded or to train through the lack of drive if it's not?
Yeah.
And I always find it much easier to train a behavior than to increase the drive of the dog. So if you're going to err on the side of the dog being in drive and happy and excited and loving agility, and then say, I'm a skilled enough trainer to undo the mistake that I've just made. It happens in 2x2 training all the time. If your timing is right on the reward of a 2x2, occasionally your dog will trick you. You think that they're about to get it right. You throw the toy and they miss and they get the toy. And students are often devastated when that happens. And I just go back and I just have to assume that I have enough skills that I'm not going to make that mistake so many times that it's going to become rewarded in. But the flip side of not rewarding would be that my timing would always be late. The dog would always turn back and that would be a much harder problem to fix.
I completely agree. I will say one thing though, and it's a term that I use sometimes, and it's taking this idea to a little bit of an extreme, which I find a separate problem. The term I sometimes use is titrating rewards. And an example would be, let's say you're teaching a dog a recall. You might have 5 different levels of like the really good food, the okay food, the just kibble, praise, and a toy. You've got those 5 different values of rewards. And you're going to try to match your value of reward to how well the dog did on that recall based on whatever criteria you're using. That to me takes way too much trainer mind space up. You can do it. It just seems like a waste of mental energy. So if I were to be doing this sort of, you reward them no matter what, but you'd give a much bigger reward if the performance was excellent. The example I think Esteban was using, I wouldn't go beyond having like maybe 2 values of it, because you can do this sort of infinitely and just tie your head up in decisions that I don't think have that big an outcome.
Right. Out of a scale of 1 to 1,000, was this a 777 or a 634?
Yeah. But you know what I mean? Once you start saying, well, I have 2 values of rewards, now, I kind of like the idea of, hey, you're in the game, you get rewarded because you tried. There's a reward in there somewhere. If you do it correctly or excellently, okay, then you get this extra bit. Again, whether it's a jackpot or not, I don't even know that matters. It's that there is a differential reinforcement and the animal can perceive that difference. And I think there would be good data to support that's actually true. You certainly would see that the animal's behavioral effort would reflect the amount of the payoff. I think that comes back to the matching law of learning theory. So it seems scientifically valid. It just, you have to wrap your mind around the dog's going to make a mistake and still get reinforced. Yeah. Maybe it wasn't the dog that made the mistake. Maybe it was us. Right?
Oh, that happens all the time in agility. I don't know how willing other trainers in other sports are to admit that sort of thing, but agility handlers have a very good understanding, at least not in the heat of the moment, that we are pretty much always the source of error, especially in handling. And I think that leads you to, kind of a corollary of what we're talking about now, is that you, the handler, make a mistake. The dog thus goes off course or does something. Right. And there's always the question of, do I reinforce or not? Right. Yeah. And most people will reinforce if they understand that maybe their cross was laid and the dog just turned wide. But if the dog goes off course or they're not sure, most people are going to withhold that reward. And, I'm not sure what side to come down on in those situations, because at some point I feel like the dog kind of accommodates itself to each specific handler, so that, if I execute a front cross in a certain way and my dog always responds to it very well, I'm trying to teach you, another handler, to front cross like me, but you don't front cross quite like me, your timing's a little off, your dog doesn't get it right, but you withhold the reward, after a couple of repetitions, your dog somehow, zeroes in on what exactly about your movement is cueing that front cross. They get it done, they get the reward, and, the dog is kind of bonded to you handling wise. So I kind of feel that makes an argument for not rewarding in those situations when the handler has made an error, because I feel like the dog, through reinforcement,
yes,
kind of accommodate. I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
Oh, it makes complete sense. That's always how I've sort of taught it, is what you're saying. They need a way to know they have to change their own behavior. You need to give them information they need to change. But I don't know. I'm just in the last year sort of changing my mind a bit on this based on my colleagues' information from Sweden. So,
well, and I think it'll obviously depend on the dog. I mean, there's some dogs that can handle a little bit of thinking through and the withhold of reward, and there's some dogs that are going to quit. As soon as they try it twice, they're just going to say, it's not worth it. So
yeah.
You gotta play to the dog.
I always remember my dear friend Dana Krevling, who had Corgi Floyd. Just brilliant dog. But when you want to think about a dog who's keen, 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 would work through a tornado for 2 hours without reinforcement. I mean, very thin reinforcement schedules. Floyd was very well trained and really understood to be persistent. I remember having a conversation with Dana, this is years ago now, and she was saying, gosh, he keeps missing the weave entry. It's so weird. He's never had a problem with that. And I said, well, I don't know what I'm talking about, but what is it you're doing after he makes a mistake? She said, well, we just try again. I said, wow, he's not even going to notice that 10 seconds of them.
Right.
I wonder what would happen if you just took a little break after he blows it. Just, a minute. She said to me, like in 2 days, that fixed it. He made like 3 mistakes and we took a little pause and he didn't know what we were doing. And so for that dog that was that keen, was never going to quit or lose drive or be slow, she had the ability to, as you just said, Sarah, take a look at her dog and go, I can afford to have a little non-reinforcement trial here to see how that changes his behavior, to see how he experiments with the behavior. And in that case, it was successful. So we probably don't want to throw out either of those techniques, but sort of realize the repercussions it has and to take a look at the dog and to see what they're going to be able to tolerate.
So you talked about one of the reasons that you use positive reinforcement, and we've talked about this on a previous podcast, is selfishly, because it works, because it once you know the science, you can skip steps, because it keeps our dogs fast. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we use it. But you've just written your first book called Plinian Life is Free, and in that book you have a much more philosophical slant on why you use positive reinforcement as well.
I do. It took me a long time to really get that book in print. It's been in my head for a long time because it felt risky to write something so not based in science. And I don't mean it's unscientific. I just mean I feel like my comfort zone, my strong suit is the science. And this to me was much more philosophical and even a little spiritual. And it came out of my frustration in working with lots of clients and even colleagues over the years who are positive trainers, yet who subscribe to some version of the Nothing in Life is Free protocol that's so ubiquitous among lots of dog trainers, but actually especially positive dog trainers. And my frustration was in what I saw as quite a bit of stifling, of tamping down of the infinitely joyous relationship that's possible between people and their dogs. People and any pet and any animal for sure, but in this case, in their everyday intimate relations with their dogs, it felt to me like they were missing humans. We're missing a great deal of joy. So it isn't even written mostly from the animal welfare perspective, although that's certainly a big piece of it. I don't know that Nothing in Life is Free protocols are always best for the animal, but I certainly have a strong feeling they're not always best for the people. If everything is so controlled and regimented and there is such little ability to just extemporaneously in the moment, spontaneously enjoy and pet your dog or love your dog or feed your dog a cookie or play with your dog, whatever comes to your mind. So it came to me more as I felt I was explaining to so many clients who came to see me why they could still be quite scientific, quite successful, have boundaries. This is not everything in life is okay and dog, you can do whatever you want. they could still have really obedient dogs that were joys to live with, but not have to follow such, to me, I use the term in the book, passive aggressive kind of procedure. It sort of was a great evolution from much more aggressive, actually brutal dog training methods that were used, earlier in our evolution as trainers. It's nice. They weren't, nothing in life is free is not a physically coercive procedure, but it just felt to me like maybe we would want to have a conversation about, could we even evolve beyond, which seemed to me the replacement was somewhat passive aggressive, that your job as an animal's handler or trainer was to often frustrate their needs or desires by not giving in to them unless they complied with your command first. And so it just was a way to introduce a conversation I wanted people to have amongst each other, or just a reflection in their own mind, how that works for them or not, and that there are other ways to achieve what we need with our dogs without having to implement that.
Well, I did read the book. It's a great book. We'll have a link on our website. But it was actually a YouTube video of you talking about the book that really stuck in my mind. And it talked about the difference between saying it is the dog's responsibility to do something to earn a reward, and saying it's my responsibility to see my dog do something to earn a reward. In both cases, you're rewarding the dog for doing something, but it's kind of like we talked about earlier, being the human half of the team, we should take the responsibility. Instead of the dog doing the behavior, it's our responsibility to see it. And I thought that was a really great point to bring. Because with people who are using some version of nothing in life is free, let's say you're using that because you have a nuisance barker. Well, A lot of times it is really easy to not notice a quiet dog.
You bet.
And this puts the responsibility on you. So I thought that was a really interesting, just kind of a paradigm shift in your own head of looking at the world.
If I could strip all my master's degree in animal behavior down to one sentence for trainers, and I do this in almost every presentation I give because it's so essential for trainers to understand this bit of your power is in providing consequences. Your power is in your ability to be a creative, meaningful, frequent reinforcer of behavior. That's where your power is. Yet that's not what it feels like. It feels like our power is in antecedents, is in talking and touching and commanding and cueing, that feels like it makes good behavior happen. And that's an illusion. So we have evolved, I think, in the sort of nothing in life is free. We want to, in the strictest version of that protocol, to be able to say to a dog, you must sit. I'm going to give you the cue to sit, or command to sit, depending on how you trained it, before I feed you or pet you or let you out or whatever good thing it is you want. I'm going to ask you to sit. And when you sit, I will give you that thing. The emphasis is in the wrong place there. It's on this rehearsal of dog responding to your command or cue. When in reality, I don't think that's what we need. We need dogs to have lots of opportunities of being reinforced for behaviors that the humans like. But we don't have to ask for them. So when they happen on their own, that's a brilliant time to capitalize on. The dog offered it out of its own sort of free will. That's great. It doesn't compete with our role as being, sort of in charge in quotation marks. But that's not typically how we teach new dog handlers. We say it's about your having a repertoire of commands. You're being commander in chief, so to speak. And I think that's unfortunate because we miss a whole lot of opportunities to just capture good behavior and to be much freer in when we, my dogs have both been in the room here with me as we've been talking for this hour. Unfortunately, the UPS man came right before you called me. I was very happy about that because there was a volley of barking that happened. But they've both been lying quietly in the room when mom does this behavior, which I do a lot, which is talking to them on the phone. And they've been brilliant the whole time. They're quietly lying at my feet. I could have an opportunity to reinforce them through this entire hour for their great behavior. I haven't asked them to do a thing. They're responding to the environmental cue of mom's going blah, blah, blah into this receiver on her mouth. That's a perfect cue for them to settle on their dog beds and rest. And I just need to reinforce that. So that's taking the burden off of you to order dogs around and instead to not only see opportunities to reinforce them, but to even take it back one step further and to go, oh, Could I set up the environment so that I'm more likely to see opportunities to reinforce them? That's a really infinitely fruitful approach to go, yes, my job is to set up opportunities to see my dogs doing behaviors I want them to do more of and to reinforce that. Boy, you can never exhaust your opportunities for that. Yet I feel like I'm going to rehearse my dogs responding to my commands or cues. It's not that we don't want that. We surely want that to be part of what they know, but that's not the priority, at least in my mind. So it's been interesting because the reaction to the book has been all across the boards to people that are liking it as being thought-provoking and other people saying, no, this really isn't for me. And that's all good because I really just wanted it to be conversation and thought-provoking. I don't want you to give up any of that spontaneous in-the-moment joy that sometimes happens when we filter everything through the lens of, did you earn it? Did you earn it? Because I'm just saying, none of my good relationships in my life, dog or human or dolphin, had that filter be on top of every interaction. We give love and reinforcements and play and touch because we're inspired to do that based on our relationship, not always because you just complied with the behavior I asked you to do. So I don't think they're contradictory approaches, but it's a way to integrate all those concepts so that again, you're thrilled with your dog and your life with your dog. You know, I joked with you guys saying we probably need to finish this up because I'm going to Belgium in a couple of days, and I'm not ready. And the seminar that I'm teaching there in Belgium, the title of the seminar is Choices. The reason that it's labeled that is my approach in the seminar is to say, you, trainer sitting in the audience, have dozens and dozens of choices you face every day as a trainer. Lots and lots of them. My job isn't to tell you how to make the choices. My job is to inform your choices. Let me give you some science and some experiential information. Let me give you information that will evolve the choices you make as trainers, because you're never going to stop having choices. And I hope you're never going to stop learning about how to make them better and better. So this conversation about how do nothing in life is free protocols, or how does my plenty in life is free protocol? How does it fit in? I think it just continues to inform the evolution of our choices we make, hopefully with the goal being more than just competition.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, Kathy.
What a wonderful conversation. You guys do a great job at podcasts. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it for this week's podcast. We want you to introduce the next podcast. So go to baddogagility.com and click on the orange button that says, I want to introduce the next Bad Dog Agility podcast. We'd like to thank Advo Agility for sponsoring today's show. Advo Agility specializes in health and wellness, weight management, vibrant energy, and sports performance for the human half of your agility team. Visit Advo Agility at advoagility.com and visit us at baddogagility.com for agility articles, videos, and podcasts. Sign up for our newsletter so you never miss an episode, and be sure to leave us a comment on the website or on Facebook. Happy training!